Hey guys, Carl from Purpose Place. I'm back from PAX Unplugged 2024 and I want to share my experiences with you. This is now my second time going to this convention after having not gone to conventions for a very long time. And just like last year, I was there for 2 days, both Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, I went by myself for the channel, trying to find new stuff to show off on the channel, trying to make new connections with media contacts at many publishers so I can get new stuff to show off at the channel, and just trying out as much stuff as I possibly could. And then on Sunday, I went back again. Last year, I went with my brother-in-law and his kids and my son for a sort of big group thing, but because of how things worked out this year, it was just myself going to the show with my 5-year-old son who's obsessed with games, as well as my 9-year-old nephew Wyatt, who some of you might know from some of these small sort of cameos he's made in some of my kid reviews recently, and will be in more coming up soon. So the three of us walked around the festival quite a bit, or walked around the convention quite a bit, trying out and playing many, many games. And I'm going to get into both of those days sort of separately. We're going to start with Saturday, and I just want to say up front here that on Saturday I didn't really get a chance to play a whole lot. I think I only played 2 games the whole day, one of which was a demo of a prototype, which I'll talk a lot about later because I was very excited about it. But the point is, Saturday was more a chance for me, because I'm only there for 2 days and because one of those days was with kids. Saturday was my day to sort of meet the people that I needed to meet new people that I hadn't met before, check out as much new stuff as I could wandering around. So what that means is now, as I go over the stuff that I did on Saturday, I'm going to sort of give you a play-by-play of what I did. And some of that's just going to simply be, I went to a place, I stopped by, I saw this person, I said hi, I'm curious, the end. And some of it's going to be more in depth or more specifically focused on certain things that I saw or certain things that excited me as I was going. So forgive me for games that I mentioned that I don't really have a lot of information about, but I'm interested in finding more about. Forgive me for focusing on some things and not on other things, but I just wanted to give you sort of a play-by-play, blow-by-blow of everything that I did while I was there. So Saturday morning, first thing I want to say before anything else, this year was super sold out, completely sold out every day, but somehow I think it's because of the sort of space. They kind of spread everything out. They moved the first look upstairs. They gave some extra space, and surprisingly this year I felt quite a bit less stressed out than I did last year. It may just be because I'm used to it now after having done it once before. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the beginning of the day. Saturday morning, I came in just before the halls opened up. I had a quick look in the first look room that had some stuff that was interesting sent over from Japan. I only peeked quick because I didn't really have time to sit down and play, because I did have a meeting scheduled right at 10 with Bezier when the actual floor opened up, the expo hall opened up. So I headed down to the expo hall pretty early before it opened up. And while I was just wandering around the free play area and the parts that were accessible before the expo hall opened up, first things first, I found this small little stand store that was just a single guy from Japan that had 5 to 10 or so games on display, but all of the games that he had on display were games that had just been released at Tokyo Game Market just like a month ago in Japan. Really, really exciting, because we don't get a chance to see a lot of that stuff here. Now, unfortunately, most of it wasn't soloable, so it doesn't mean a whole lot for this channel. But one of them absolutely was, and that's Hisashi Hayashi's newest game, Rail on the Hill, that just got published by Okazu brand at the most recent Tokyo Game Market. So the very first thing I did at this game show, and the only thing that I bought with my own money that I needed to have instantly, was this game. I have played it once now. So far, I'm really enjoying it. It's sort of a city building, mean we're slotting tiles together to build out a town, a city, that you're then connecting with 4, red, blue, yellow, black, I believe, 4 different train lines, trying to have each train line meet certain things and go through certain places and so on. It's a really interesting city builder / rail connection management kind of game. There will absolutely be a video coming to my channel for that one, but I just wanted to point it out. Really, really cool to see a booth like that at PAX Unplugged, bringing games over from Japan that probably wouldn't get any exposure whatsoever otherwise, so yay to see that. So anyway, after I did that, the expo hall was just about to open. I got in a really, really long queue. Watch here for a second. This is the video of me waiting. Lots and lots and lots of people in line, but once the doors open, everybody went in pretty quickly. No pushing, no crazy, no rushing, nobody running off to get a game because things are going to sell out. There was no wild. We just slowly fed into the expo hall, and I went straight over to Bezier Games. Now, I know a lot of what Bezier does, especially in recent times, is very multiplayer focused, so I know that there's not going to be a whole lot that I can show off on my channel, but part of this was a little bit selfish in that the newest marketing manager, marketing community manager, whatever the job title is, I'm not sure, is Jay from Cardboard East, another channel on YouTube that covers tons and tons of games from Japan and all kinds of other Asian countries as well. So part of me was going just to meet and say hi to Jay because we cover a lot of the same kind of games on YouTube. I just wanted to say hi. I just wanted to stop in and see if Bezier had any cool surprises coming up. Basically, the gist I got in as few words as possible, because again, there's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to cover on my channel, is that this past year has sort of been the year of small card games, and moving forward next year, they're going back to the sort of werewolf idea of Bezier, and it's going to be sort of a year of fear. They're going to have everything they're releasing has some kind of fear or Halloween or werewolfy kind of element tied into it, going sort of back to their past for a little bit. Again, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about from Bezier because there weren't any big titles that were like, hey, this is solo and it's coming out, watch out. But I will continue to keep my eye on it, and I will absolutely continue to keep in touch with Jay should anything arise. After that, I had a little bit of time until my next meeting at 11, so I kind of just started wandering around. The first thing I did was I just popped in at Kinsen Key. If you don't know Kinsen Key, I previewed their only game was just recently crowdfunded is Galactic Cruise, a really big, crunchy Euro game about sort of building rocket ships to take tourist groups into outer space. Really, really, really loved what I saw with the preview of that, and I was super excited to be able to see the sort of finished product. They've got the production copy, they had the neoprene mats, they had the metal money, they had the acrylic tokens. Everything looks gorgeous, and I didn't take any pictures, I'm sorry, but everything looks really gorgeous. I cannot wait to get my final copy of that game. There are some expansions for the game that I didn't have access to with the preview, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some videos pop up on my channel. Maybe an unboxing to show off all the pretty goodness that came in there, but almost definitely an expansion review or maybe even more playthroughs using the expansions on this channel. I just wanted to point out that game looks as good as I expected it to, and then some, so very, very excited to see that. After that, I did a quick stop in at Mindclash. Mindclash is a game company that I've been super, super curious about after games like Tricarion and Anachrony, and what else am I missing? There's a bunch of games that they've done, most recently Voidfall, that's getting a huge ton of solo love, and I've never played any Mindclash games, and I've really been wanting to get into that and really wanting to fix that sort of mistake on my channel. So I did stop in to talk with the media person there just so I can sort of start up a relationship with them, hopefully start covering some Mindclash games. I did get a peek at, I didn't get a chance to play, but I did get a peek at Revenant, which is the new sort of worker placement spin-off of the Voidfall universe. And it looks really cool. It's sort of spaceships flying around in space with these sort of worker placement spaces on those ships. I didn't, again, get to see a whole lot about it, so I don't want to pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but it's gorgeous. It looks really cool. There's a whole lot of really cool looking moving parts that I'm very excited. Sorry I can't say more, but if all goes well, I'd love to show off that game on this channel, and then I will be able to say a whole lot more. So that was Mindclash. All right, so then I still had a little bit more time to kill before my meeting. Walking around, I did happen to walk past the Direwolf digital booth, who I've been a big fan of for things like Clank and the Dune Imperium games and Wild Tile West, and there's been quite a few games they've put out now that I've really, really enjoyed. And there's one that I've been somewhat interested about but knew very little about, is that I knew they had an Invincible game, or a new game based on the Invincible comic IP, so I was excited to see more about that, and they did have a little demo station set up. So I sat in for the sort of spiel on that game, and it looks really interesting to me. It's a cooperative bag building game where you're sort of pulling out different colored cubes, and the cubes that you're pulling out activate different attacks or defense or different abilities that your character has, and you're trying to fight off, beat up these different bad guys and enemies that are coming out. But it's a sort of campaign, a narrative campaign style game, so apparently as you're playing through it's not legacy, but it's legacy-esque in that things are being added and things are being changed, and the game is, the way that the game plays is apparently changing as you play through the narrative based on the story that's happening in the narrative. Again, I don't really have much to say because he didn't want to spoil any of the hidden content stuff, and I didn't get a chance to actually play the game, but as a big fan of bag builders and as a pretty decent fan of the Invincible IP, I'm very excited to get a chance to check that out later. After that, I popped in very quickly to the Leader Games booth. I mostly just wanted to stop in and say hi to everybody there, but more importantly, I wanted to stop by and say hi, particularly to Liz Davidson, for several reasons. One, because she's just a fellow solo content creator that I've been somewhat of a fan of for a while, but more importantly right now is that she is working with Ricky Royal on a solo mode for Oath. And Oath is a game that I have that sits on my shelf because I don't have anybody to play with, and I've been sort of warned away from the original solo mode that's in the game. But now that Liz Davidson and Ricky Royal are working on a solo mode for Oath, I am incredibly excited to see how that turns out, and I really want to try it. So I wanted to stop in and just make contact and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. And I was very happy to hear that I should be able to get access to sort of the in-progress prototype print and play asset kind of stuff so that I can start trying some of that out. And boy, am I excited, because I'm a big fan of sort of Cole Worley's stuff. I love what he's done in Root. I love a lot of the other stuff that Leader Games has been doing. So to see this sort of more narrative, changing over time kind of story, but also war-ish kind of game. Again, I don't know too much because I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I'm very excited to see what they can do to make this game work solo and make it work well solo. And having Liz and Ricky's names behind this excites me even more, so I'm very hopeful that I'll get a chance to take a look at some of that in-progress work soon. And then just a little bit more time on my way to the meeting, I walked past the Flat Out booth. Flat Out, working with AAG, has been doing things like Point City, Point Salad. They've done all of those sort of spatial puzzlers like Calico and Cascadia and Nocturne and Verdant. So I wanted to see what they've got coming out. And the first thing I saw is their new game, Propolis. It's a bumblebee worker colony, worker placement, tableau building kind of game in which you've got bumblebees that you're placing out in different locations, collecting like different kinds of flower kind of resources, nectar resources, and then spending those to buy cards to build out a tableau. And the cards that you're buying with the resources are going to give you the ability to get more workers to place out, are going to give you the ability to score points based on specific things that you've done in the game, are going to give you the ability to sort of build up permanent resources that you always have available to you to buy other things. But then also each of the cards that is a worker placement sort of set of worker placement spots, as you're placing out workers in there, they're filling up the cards, and then as the cards fill up, it becomes a sort of area majority fight that you get stuff for having taken that card with more bees than the other players had there. And this one does have an AI-based solo mode, so I'm very excited to see how the AI works in this, but the combination of a sort of simple resource management worker placement game with a cool tableau building system, maybe a la things they've done with things like Point City, definitely has me excited. And there was more for me to see at Flat Out, but at that time I had to run back to the media room because I had a meeting scheduled with Danny from the Flat River Group. If you don't know Flat River, this is an amazing group working behind the scenes with a bunch of international publishers, helping them to get their games localized in America. Lots of great stuff coming from them. This meeting wasn't specifically solo focused though. This was a meeting for me, mostly for me to connect with Flat River Group better so that I can get more stuff from them to cover on the channel in the future. But this was actually a demo of a new game from a fairly new publisher called Playpunk, which is actually a publisher created by designer Antoine Bauza, whose name you might recognize from things like Seven Wonders and Takenoko and Tokaido. Anyway, this new company, Playpunk, has also been getting lots of buzz recently from their game Captain Flip. Well, their newest game, Zenith, is the game that I demoed in this meeting, and it's sort of a head-to-head two-player game that can also be played four-player in teams of 2 versus 2. But it's this really cool push and pull sort of tug-of-war game there are a variety of different factions that you're competing in trying to get sort of gaining influence to control that faction. And you can do it multiple times because in order to win the game, you basically have to get the same faction on your side several times, or sort of one of each of the factions once on your side. But basically you're playing cards from your hand for a variety of different reasons. You can play a card paying the resources required to sort of pull the influence markers of each of the tracks towards you, and then also triggering the abilities of the cards. But the interesting thing is that every time you play a card of a specific color matching one of these specific tracks, that card color gets cheaper. So any cards you play later onto that stack of cards, you discount by the number of cards of the same color that have been played out. But then the cards also have symbols on them, and the symbols can be used with a different kind of resource, kind of like a money, in order to move up on these other tracks that are sort of like, almost like a tech tree, like you're increasing your ability in each of these different animal guilds or what have you to get different abilities as you're moving up. And you're also triggering things not just from moving up on those tracks, but if you manage to get all of the tracks moved up to a different level together, then you trigger something else from having done that as well. So you're sort of trying to get real high on specific tracks to get powerful abilities, but you're also trying to push them all up so you can get bonuses from getting them all up. Then there's another small place where you can play cards to sort of just get a little bit extra resource that you need to pay for things or to get the first place marker. Because if you have that marker, it also increases the number of cards you can have in your hand. Anyway, really cool multi-use card system, really cool tug-of-war push-pull on these different influence tracks of these different colors. Really, really fun game. Again, no solo mode, but great news, it is coming to BGA very shortly, and I cannot wait to play a bunch of this async on BGA because this seems like the kind of game that would be absolutely perfect for that kind of play. So I'm excited to see more of this. I'm also excited to continue working with Flat River Group as they show off a bunch more games over here in America. So I left that meeting and I immediately went right back to Flat Out because there was one more game from Flat Out that I really wanted to take a look at. And that is the newest game in the Point Salad, Point City series, the newest one called Point Galaxy. Very similarly to those old games, the core mechanism is basically just draft 2 cards. But the way that this is working, or the twist that this is adding now, is the cards that you're drafting sort of need to be placed in increasing sequential order. And there are certain cards you can place that sort of resets that order, but otherwise you can only place higher cards or equal cards, I believe, onto those stacks. But then there are also specific cards like meteors that score in different ways, and there are different kinds of galaxy cards, moons and stars and suns and so on, that score in different ways. There's a lot about it that I'm not remembering now as I'm spewing all of this to you on camera, but it is increasingly getting cool, built onto Point Salad, built onto Point City. And just like Point City, this one has that same sort of AI mode where the AI is sort of going around the edge, drafting specific cards so you can kind of plan for what the AI is going to draft to stop them from getting things so you can get them before they do, or not let them to get certain things so they don't score on them. In any case, this is one I missed out on Point City. I might go back to it at some point, but I was a pretty big fan of Point Salad, and now that these have solo modes, and now that they're adding more sort of complicated decision trees and puzzles on top of them, I'm very excited to try out Point Galaxy, and I hope to at some point bring it to you on this channel. So after that, I just sort of started walking around a little bit, and the next place I wandered over to was Red Raven. I am a huge fan of Red Raven games from way back. Above and Below was one of the games that got me back into the hobby, I don't know, more than 10 years ago, more than a decade ago, when I started to get back into things. Above and Below was one that I really got into. My wife and I played it all the time. I have everything for it. I've got the Geek Up bits, I've got the expansion book, I've got the expansion tokens to play with all the extra stuff. And then recently they just announced Above and Below Haunted, I believe it's called. It's sort of a spiritual successor, second version of the game that has been recently crowdfunded, but as part of that, they released a solo mode both for the new game and as well in a small pack with some other upgraded bits for the original Above and Below. And as a solo player and as somebody who loves Above and Below as much as I did, I was really excited to contact and connect with the media person at Red Raven because I really want to bring it to this channel to show it off for all of you. Now, bad news is the solo stuff is sort of locked away inside an expansion, or not even an expansion, but inside the stretch goal stuff for the new game, or inside that sort of box of extra goodies for the old game, and is only Kickstarter exclusive, which is a little bit sad. But I have gone back in. Late pledges are still open right now, so I did go back. I haven't gotten Above and Below Haunted, but I am going to pick up a copy of that small box with the solo mode for Above and Below the original, so that I can show it off on this channel. It does make me a little bit sad that I won't be able to say, hey, now go out and get your own copy, because it won't be available to get, probably, unless retailers backed it on Kickstarter and they're selling it off. But in any case, it's a game that means a lot to me, and I really do want to try out the solo. And if I try out the solo, I might as well show off to you how much it works or doesn't work. Also with the hope that if we do, as solo people, start pushing Red Raven and say, hey, look, solo is something we really do care about, that maybe in future campaigns they'll start including the solo as part of the sort of core experience, or at least at retail in a sort of expansion pack of some kind. After my stop at Red Raven, Hachette Games was very close by. Hachette is another group that sort of is in charge of bringing over games from several different French publishers to America. I've recently just covered Flashback Zombie Kids and Flashback Lucy, and will be soon bringing Zombie Kids Evolution review to this channel. Those are all from a studio called Scorpion Masqué, which is underneath this Hachette umbrella. Well, while I was there, I saw this game that I'd never seen before and didn't know anything about, and that is a game called Chronologic. And talking with the people there, it turns out Chronologic is the next game from the designer of Turing Machine. This is sort of the next iteration of that kind of logical puzzle game that Turing Machine was. Except this is sort of taking Turing Machine and Clue and smashing them together. So basically the gist of this game is, that somebody's been killed in a specific room at a specific time by a specific person. And it's your job to figure out who killed them, where they were, and what time it happened. And the way that it works is similar to the Turing Machine system in that you're basically going to take a card from the location that you're curious about. And then on top of that card, you're either going to overlay a person tile or you're going to overlay a time tile. And when you put the time tile over that location, it will tell you how many people were at that location. And when you put the person tile over that location, it will tell you when, if ever, that person was at that location. Except that you're going to sort of get two different levels of information. Everyone at the table, every time somebody checks one of those tiles, will get some small amount of information. And then only the person who is checking specifically is going to get some additional information on top of that. So knowing when to ask which location and whether to ask about people or time, you're going to slowly piece together how many people were in which rooms, which people were in what rooms. Start to try and figure out tracking the people as they move from room to room until there was one person only in the room with the person who got killed, and then the person who got killed didn't move again, basically. And at that point, you can figure out, well, that was the time, that was the location, and that was the person who killed that guy. And it seems like a really, really cool logical puzzle, and there is a solo mode in there, so I really want to grab a copy of this to check out the solo. Now, I will say whether this is negative or not is up to you, but each of these cases, once they've been solved, that's it. There's no like iteration on it. So there are a set number of cases in the box, and once you've played through them, that's that. So there is some limited replayability to it, but if I'm not mistaken, I don't have a copy of Turing Machine, but I'm pretty sure they made an app for it that created new stories. And I know that this game, talking with the people there, is going to at least have one more expansion that has more cases for it. So potentially there would be more content for it that continues going. But either way, I'm really excited to see more about it. I haven't had a chance to play it, but I really want to. So yeah, I'm excited to see more about Chronologic. After Hachette, I started heading over towards the center of the expo hall, and that's because something interesting happened this year. Oink Games has been at PAX before, but on top of Oink, there was a more sort of Asian representation at the game show this year. Right across from Oink Games was Sashi and Sashi, who happened to be a publishing company that I'm really, really fond of. I recently covered Come Sail Away on the channel, and a bunch of their games are games that I've really enjoyed. So I was hoping to see if maybe there was something new solo. And truthfully, I didn't have much chance to stop in at Sashi and Sashi. They were mostly selling their small multiplayer card games, so I kind of didn't bother. But right next to Sashi and Sashi is a company called Origame out of Singapore by designer Daryl Chow. And I did stop in and I talked to Daryl for quite a while about their games because many of their games do have solo modes, both AI and beat your own score-based solo modes. And I'm really excited to start trying out some of their games and hopefully showing off some of their games on the channel. There were two in particular that I had a look at the game. I didn't get to play, sorry, at the con. I didn't get to play either one of them, but I did get a sort of walkthrough of them, and I've seen them. And I've also watched Jay from Cardboard East cover one of them, and that one is Overparked. It's a recent game from them. It's a fairly larger box game. It kind of reminds me of, there's a Think Fun puzzle game where you've got a bunch of cars on a location and you kind of have to slide them around to figure out how to get one car out of the parking lot. It's kind of like that in reverse. It's a sort of polyomino style tile laying game where you're laying different shaped cars into a parking lot, scoring based on the shapes and different kinds of scoring conditions that you're given in the game. I'm a big fan of spatial puzzles, big fan of polyomino. The components in there looked really cool. The artwork for it looks really cool. I'm very curious to try that one out. The other one is called Chock-a-Block. And from what I understand, I didn't get much about that. I just saw a little bit of it. It's a very small box game, and it's basically a card laying over top of each other kind of game. Think something along the lines of like Sprawlopolis from Button Shy, where you're layering these cards and you're building out basically an apartment complex, and each apartment has different characteristics in it, like cats in there and things like that, and you're trying to place them so that you get groupings of specific icons. And then there are specific things that when laid next to each other trigger other things that you can sort of overlay tiles on top, adding new components to some of the apartments to help with those sort of area scoring conditions. Again, I didn't get a ton out of this game, but it looks really cool. Small box, spatial puzzle, overlay card system, scoring based on clusters of things. Looked like a whole lot of fun. I'm definitely going to try and get my hands on some of these Origame games because I think they should be shown off, particularly because I haven't seen a whole lot of channels covering solo modes of their games. After Origame, I kept sort of wandering off to the back edge of the convention center, and that's because I was making my beeline way over to see Dan Halligan at Kayenta Games. He was there, as always, showing off all of his wonderful Obsession stuff, and as you know, I have quite an obsession with Obsession, pardon the pun, but having finally tried that game, I really fell in love with it. I've done a review on my channel, and I previewed the most recent expansion, the Characters expansion, which is now finally fulfilling to backers. He had it there, he was showing it off, including the metal coins that he's made with it. Metal coins, I talked about them a little bit last year, super heavy, super chunky, gorgeous components. But more importantly, something I saw for the first time, and I know it's been in there, but I didn't have a chance to take a look at it, is the new cooperative mode in the Characters expansion. I don't know a whole lot about it except you're playing against a family whose name I believe is Snade, and they're super evil, slimy, grimy, kind of bad guys who are doing all kinds of negative stuff that lets them get a ton of points and a ton of stuff, engine building, going super fast. And you've got to sort of play against them as a team, working to, well, outpace them, but at the same time try and do things that sort of sabotages them and slows them down as much as you can, piling on negative points to them by throwing some of the less wanted gentry at them and so on, to sort of slow down their steamrolling train so that you can get stuff done before the end of the game. Again, I don't have a whole lot of detail, but I will be getting a copy of the Characters expansion and the metal coins, which I'll show off on the channel as well. But I might like to try and do a two-handed solo co-op version video playthrough of that new expansion or that new cooperative mode because it did look really, really cool. And then right next door to Dan at Kayenta Games was Off the Page Games. If you don't know already, Off the Page Games is the new publishing company from Jay Cormier and Sen-Fung Lim that's focused on designing games based on creator-owned comics. They've done several so far. I've covered several of them on the channel. Let me try and remember. They've got Mind Management, which I did cover on the channel. They followed that up with Harrow County, which I haven't had a chance to try, mostly because the solo is just an extra little module on it and not really the core gameplay experience. But then most recently I did preview Core of Discovery for them, the Manifest Destiny themed, Manifest Destiny being the comic book themed sort of deduction logic game, survival kind of game. Anyway, really, really loved that one after playing it quite a bit and figuring out how the gears of that one worked. Got to see the final production company with all of the chunky bits and the giant wooden board that the boards slot into. Everything looks gorgeous. Was nice to finally get to meet Jay and Sen in person. Awesome, awesome guys. Really great games that they've been doing. But also while I was there, Jay Cormier has started doing this thing right here by me, Design Your Destiny. It's a cool sort of comic book story that you play through, and as you play through it, sorry, not comic book, it's a cool sort of story that you're playing through, and as you play through it, throughout the story, there are games that you'll play. And it teaches you the rules and it says play this game, and then after you've played the game, it says, okay, so what was good, what was bad, what would you fix, how would you fix it, and it sort of pushes you to develop the games, to learn how to design games, to learn how to make games better, to iterate through the different kinds of games. I haven't had a chance to dig into it yet, but I've been running an after-school sort of board game design and mechanisms kind of class for my students at school, and I'm thinking that this one could be one that works really well in that class because in addition to having the story and the workbook kind of thing that comes in the box, all of the documentation for the game is also PDF available online. So I could basically print out a book for everybody using the components in this box. And we can kind of work through it together while they're all sort of doing their own brainstorming and their own planning. And I really hope that it will work out in my class. So definitely expect a review from that on my channel because I'm excited also as a budding future designer, potential designer, someone who's at least very curious about trying to design something at some point. I am very curious to try that one out, and I look forward to sharing it with all of you. Staying over in that sort of smaller independent area, my next stop was at a booth for a company called DVC Games. It's a company I'd never heard about before. They have several games at least being shown at the con. I don't know how long they've been around for. The first one I took a look at was a game called Scream Park, which is a sort of theme park, horror-themed kind of game where you're building out a theme park, trying to build attractions that sort of have matching theme and matching to specific kinds of visitors. But basically, anyway, the way that the game works with a simple elevator pitch is that it is a drafting game, a closed drafting game, a la things like Seven Wonders or Sushi Go, where you are drafting cards, playing them out to build out these different attractions in your park, looking to collect certain sets and score points based on how the sets work. And I believe if you get certain things in a certain column, it then triggers other abilities. Again, I don't know a whole lot about this, but I do have review copies of this publisher's games coming to me soon. So this is one I will be showing off. And another one from the same company that looks very interesting is a game called Typeset, where you're sort of drawing consonants from a bag, little by little by little, and you're spelling out words with them using some vowels that you can check off on your sheet. It's kind of a roll and write, flip and write, but no rolling or flipping. It's drawing letter tiles and write kind of game, but it allows you to quit when you think you've done as best you can, but you can push your luck to draw more tiles to continue to try and draw words. But again, eventually if you hit a wall eventually that you can't then write words, you lose points for or you get punished for. Anyway, it's a very interesting draw tiles and write spelling word game with push your luck elements. Again, I don't know too much, but it looks really cool. Visually, it looks really cool as well. I look forward to covering both Scream Park and Typeset on this channel at some point in the future. Just down the aisle from DVC Games was Paper Fort Games. Paper Fort Games is a company you might recognize from their work on Henry Audubon's Cosmoctopus, which you see down here right behind me. I've got a video for it coming before too long, finally. This one was eventually sort of published or at least released to retail by Lucky Duck Games, but it sounds now that Paperfort is sort of taking their own stuff under their own wing and continuing with it, because they now have a big game that I was very excited about last year. I saw a very early preview for it. It has now gone through crowdfunding, and that is their board game version of Terraria. Terraria being a cell phone app, sort of Minecraft-esque, but 2D platformer, dig and mine and build and fight kind of app game. I don't know, I've never played the app, but the board game version of it looks really cool. I stopped in to see how the development on that was going. They've got these huge neoprene mats with all of these map tiles and people running around, and these really, really cool minis of enemies from the game that are sort of multiple pieces that slot together. Very, very excited about that. I did talk to them. Once things start coming out, I will very likely have a copy to review on this channel. I am excited to share that. Even as somebody who's never played the app, it looks really cool. But also, while I was there, I talked to them a little bit about Cosmoctopus and was told that there is a sequel in the works, or at least an expansion in the works, called Prismoctopus. Going to have another cool, stuffed animal, stuffy kind of plushy figure with it. Clear octopus. I don't know how they're going to do that in plushies, but it's a clear octopus, again, called Prismoctopus. Going to add in some extra mechanisms and resources to the game. And also very nicely, which I'll talk about in my video for Cosmoctopus, they've sort of addressed the concerns from fans that the solo mode in the original one was too difficult, and hopefully the solo mode in Prismoctopus will help address some of that and change things up a bit, so there should be a very fulfilling solo mode in Prismoctopus as well. So I'm very excited to see how that turns out too. Continuing down the aisle, I had to make my obligatory stop in at Button Shy just to say hi to the Button Shy guys. No extreme bias on this channel, but you all know me and you know my connection with Button Shy. I cover lots of Button Shy games. The Button Shy offices are just down the street from where my sister lives now and from where the area where I grew up as a kid. So I'm always happy to say hi to them. I did stop in to say hi, and you'll see here I picked up the 2 newest expansions for Mysticana. If you had a chance, I did preview Mysticana a while back. And it's a really interesting new system that Button Shy has created, where basically with a deck of 18 cards, they're basically regular old playing cards, but designed in a new way with different kind of numbers and different kind of symbology or suits. And with that 18 card deck plus one expansion of some kind, you can create new games. So they're continuing to release basically new games by releasing these new 6-card packs with rules. And I've got now 2 more of those new games with 6-card packs, and I will be checking out both of them and very likely covering both of them on the channel, because I did like what I saw in my preview of the core game before it was on Kickstarter. Another quick stop in this time was Post Curious. If you don't know Post Curious, they are an amazing company that's doing these really, really, really cool narrative-focused, heavily narrative-focused, sort of escape room in a box puzzle style games. I've covered a bunch of them on my channel. I have another one coming up soon, Threads of Fate. I didn't have anything to pick up from them because I already have all of their games, Threads of Fate being the only one that I haven't covered yet. But I did have some Purple Moose pins with me at the convention, so I was very lucky to be able to trade a couple of pins, and I got a Morrison Game Factory pin and another one, I believe, from Light in the Mist, a little sort of fairy-looking character. Pins, really, really cool pins. I'm very glad to have them. Thank you again for trading me. I look forward to seeing more stuff coming from them. They were showing off their newest game that I did just cover recently, the Ministry of Lost Things, which I loved, so it was great to see that getting some love from other people at the con as well. Next thing, I'm sort of transferring across back towards the main area for a while, and I stopped by a small publisher whose name I forget, so give me a second to check. It is Urban Professional Games, and they've got this new game coming out called Chicken Fried Dice. Chicken Fried Dice will have a solo mode that I'm very excited to see, but Chicken Fried Dice is this really cool, basically roll and write, but very gamey, very, I don't want to say complicated, but lots of stuff going on, roll and write. with some real-time elements. So basically everybody who's playing the game has a set of dice, and all of the dice get rolled into the middle of the table at the same time. And then from those dice, you're all sort of in real time drafting dice from that available pile to everybody to place into your food truck to get different ingredients to sort of meet the orders of different customers that are coming to your food truck, but at the same time using different things in your food truck that let you sort of chop dice to take a value and split it into 2 dice that add up to that value, or mixing things, changing colors, changing numbers. But you're leveling up different tracks on your food truck as well that get towards end game scoring and bonuses that sort of combo. You get this that gives you a thing over here, that gives you a thing over here, that lets you manipulate your dice, that lets you upgrade the ability to manipulate dice later. Lots of cool combos and upgrades going on in this interesting roll and write real-time drafting dice game that I'm very excited to see more, and very hopefully will be covering the solo mode of on this channel at some point moving forward. Then slowly wandering around to sort of wrap up the day, making sure I stop in to say hi to everybody. I stopped in a kid table board game to say hi to Sean over there, and hopefully say hi to Helena as well. She wasn't there at the time, but while I was there, I did see that they were showing off Layers again. Layers is a game that I saw last year. It's a 2-player head-to-head battleship, basically. It's like Gamer's Battleship. You're starting off the beginning of the game by building a dungeon that's got pathways that you're building with walls, and you have to place treasures in there, and different enemies in there, and traps in there. And then after you've both designed it, just like placing your battleships in the Battleship game, you then take turns moving your character, your adventurer, through the other player's dungeon, trying to get to the treasures and get out of the dungeon. And I've been really excited to see more of that one, and I really wanted to try it out, but at that time I was wandering by myself, because I was there by myself, and I left the booth. And you'll see in a minute I do come back, but let me continue my story, because that's how I've been telling all of this stuff. I was wandering, I wanted to stop in. I stopped by Mighty Boards, because I've heard from Mike at the One Stop Co-op Shop just how great their recent game Fate Forge is, and I wanted to get a look myself, and boy am I glad I did, because it does look really cool. It's a sort of small, the game itself is not small, but the maps are not these huge sprawling maps, sort of smallish maps that you're playing through by rolling a bunch of dice and using the dice that you've rolled to sort of activate different abilities, dungeon crawler style kind of thing. But really cool, at least from what I saw, variability in scenarios, variability in characters, really cool dice-driven everything, action selection, and apparently really cool narrative unfolding scenarios and campaign. Been very excited to see more of that. I'm glad I stopped by because it does look very interesting, and I'm crossing my fingers that having now made the connection with their media person and poking a little bit, that hopefully at some point I get to cover it on my channel. And if they don't do it for me, I may have to use my Noble Knight sponsorship to make that happen on my own. But I'm very excited to see more at Fate Forge. And now while I was over there as well, I stopped in at Thunderworks just to say hi. Jess is the media contact over there, and I've worked with her a bunch on other things that I've covered, and I'm very excited to see more from them. They didn't have any of the new stuff there yet, but I do still want to see some of their things. They've got the dice sort of follow up to, wow, now I can't remember the original game either. The bidding game that I covered before, and I'm sorry, I'll put words right down there because I can't remember it, and I'll put the name of the dice one here. The dice one is that. I'm very excited about them, even though I can't. I think Emerald Skulls, there we go. The dice game is called Emerald Skulls, and the other one is, I don't know, but we'll get there. Anyway, I stopped in to potentially look at Emerald Skulls. They've also got Citizens of the Spark, I believe, is the new one that just recently crowdfunded. I'm very excited to see both of those. Didn't get a chance to see either of them, but I did manage to pick up my copy of Metro Runner that I hadn't gotten yet. Still curious to take a look at this sort of worker placement rondelle-ish game with a little bit of a puzzle, sliding puzzle in the middle of it. This one might be coming to the channel before too long. While there, I also got a sneak peek at, I can't say anymore, but I'm very excited to send more later on, so keep an eye on this channel in the future for that. But that's that at Thunderworks. Now, while I was there, I saw Rose Gauntlet was very close to Thunderworks. I covered Rose Gauntlet's game before Keystone North America, was a sort of tile-laying spatial puzzle that you score based on adjacency of animals in wilderness and so on. And they recently did another game whose name is slipping my mind right now, but While I was there, I saw a little sign that says, hey, we're running demos of our new game over in the demo area. Come check it out. It's a narrative adventure game. And I said, huh? Narrative adventure game from this company. Wild Gardens was the newest one. Wild Gardens and Keystone North America are very much sort of puzzly kind of games. And now they've got narrative adventure, huh? So anyway, I'll come back to that in a minute, because while I was wandering around, I was texting some people. And luckily, Patrick, who is Parker Lewis on the One Stop Co-op Shop Discord server, was nice enough to swoop in and be my opponent in the game of Layers. So I did go back to Kids Table. I did see Helena. She was there the second time. I did say hi. Not that important to all of you, but more importantly, what is important is I did get a chance to play Layers, and wow, I love this game. It really is gamer battleship. As I said, you build out this pathway with walls, placing out treasures and traps and monsters. And while you're going through, when you're planning, you have to have no more than one monster and one trap between any one given pathway to the exit. It means you need to be able to reach the exit from every treasure, having passed only through one monster and one trap. But you're going through trying to figure out, trying to sort of map your opponent's dungeon, looking for treasures, fighting the monsters, disarming the traps along the way, trying to get points from sort of set collection from some of the treasures that you're gaining, from slaying some of the monsters in the dungeon. And what's even cooler, because I enjoyed the playthrough that we had, but after playing the playthrough that we had, they told us, that's the main game. But the main game is not the game that you're going to be playing for very long, because what I didn't know going into this demo is that there's a bunch of unlock boxes inside the core game's experience. So after you've played, or after you've done certain achievements, or after whatever it is, I don't know what those afters are because I haven't seen it yet, but after you do certain things, you open new boxes, and you get different characters that go into the dungeon that have different abilities. You get different monsters that you're fighting that have different abilities or different rewards. You get all kinds of stuff that unlocks and makes this game even more variable and even more good, more goodness all mixed up in there. I keep wanting to say complex, but that's the wrong word, but more stuff going on that really makes me excited about this. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the kind of game, because it is a head-to-head battleship kind of game. It's not the kind of game that's probably going to ever work solo, but it is a game that I'm very excited about. Kids Table Board Games puts out these beautiful sort of productions that work great for family level, but also, especially in things like this with unlocks that add things to it, really great in sort of more gamery level as well. So I can't wait to see more of Layers, and you better believe I will be following up to find out more about it. Then finally, as I said, I saw this sign at Rose Gauntlet that said, check out our new narrative adventure game. This game is called Gone to Gaia, and the very last thing I did on Saturday before going home was sit down for a demo of Gone to Gaia. Gone to Gaia is a 1-to-2, yes, that's only 1-to-2 cooperative, 1-to-2 player cooperative narrative adventure game. Set in this weird future where this sort of mist has taken over the planet, and everybody has sort of relocated to, I think they call it the peak. It's like the bird's nest or bird's peak or something. Sorry, I forget the actual word for it, but everybody's sort of located to this top of this mountain. And these people are going out in these giant sort of diving suits called delver suits into the mist. The mist has sort of messed up creatures and turned them into these sort of mutated, powerful versions of themselves. And you're sort of going into the mist to collect resources to help sort of keep your world going at the top of this mountain, but then also to sort of narratively figure out what's going on in this world. And it's sort of a roguelite narrative adventure game, because you're going down into these worlds in your Delver suit, fighting off basically every scenario, every chapter, every game you play is going to be 2 waves of enemies on a grid-based system. And the way that it works is you have to sort of wipe out one wave, and then the next wave will spawn, and you wipe them out, and then you will have won that scenario. But if you're sort of wiped out in the middle of a wave, you sort of run away. You go into runaway mode, and you run away from the battle, and everybody who's left is sort of pounding on you as you run away. But if you survive that runaway, you can then sort of choose to reset and do the second wave, or you can just sort of run away and leave that story and continue on to whatever happens because you've run away. Again, failing forward in this is great. There is fail forward in the story, but the ability to sort of recoup and then attack the wave, the second wave, is really interesting because if you've built up enough in the first wave, you may be able to take over the second wave even if you've lost in the first wave. But let me talk more about what the waves are. It's very much combat focused, almost boss battler kind of thing, except there's a bunch of minions on the board instead of one big boss. But it's all grid based. And you're moving around this grid attacking attacking monsters, enemies, animals, whatever they are, using item cards. And every time you use an item card, it goes into a slot on your character board. And the only way you can get that back into your hand is by spending 2 of a specific resource associated with the slot that you put that card in. But if you don't have resources, the cards don't ever come back. And if you ever run out of cards, that's when you're automatically triggered into this runaway mode. So you have to, while fighting these creatures, make sure that you're killing creatures that give you specific resources so that you can have the right resource to refresh the card and bring it back into your hand. Because some of the cards are attacks, which are those cards that I was just talking about. But some of the cards are passive cards that stay in front of you all the time and give you some kind of ability. And it's nice to have a passive card. But if I have a passive card, that means I have 1 less attack card, which means I have 1 less card that's cycling in and out of my hand doing things. And if I don't have a card to play on my turn, I can't take a turn. So a turn consists of playing one of those cards for an action and also moving in either order. And the enemies, once they're attacked, will retaliate. But the way that they retaliate is they have like blue and red arrows on the 8 different directions, means up, down, left, right, and the 4 diagonals. Usually one color in one way and the other color in the sort of diagonals or orthogonals. And you roll a die, and from 1 to 4 triggers the blue arrows, and 5 and 6 triggers the red arrows, and the enemies will attack in those directions that are triggered by the die roll as far as the number of arrows that are printed on each of the enemy's cards. So it's a matter of trying to hit the enemies, trying to manage this refresh cycle of attack cards, while also placing yourself into locations that after you hit the enemy is less likely to attack you back again. And while you're killing the enemies, when you kill an enemy, sometimes you get resources, and sometimes you get experience points. And the experience points you're going to build up to level up. And every time you level up, you generally get the option to either buy new cards from a set of different kinds of cards, like there's sword cards and spear cards and long-range weapon cards and defense cards and armor cards and like tricky acrobatic card, and you can either choose from a couple of different types of cards that they give you, or if you already have a card of that type, you can choose to upgrade to the next level of that card. Whereas when you upgrade to the next level, it's making it more powerful. But again, remember, if you don't have cards to cycle through, then the game is basically triggered over. So it's important to grow your hand at the same time upgrading the cards that you think are worth upgrading to make yourself more powerful when you take an action. It's a really, really cool system. And I mentioned a bit of a roguelite. That's because as you're killing the creatures, they're also dropping like monster parts. And you can take those monster parts and bring them back at the end of a mission to sort of upgrade things at home, making your Delver suit stronger, sort of increasing the maximum level that you can raise your different cards up to. There's also something in the narrative that there are sort of named NPC kind of characters, and depending on how you do and what you do in your missions, you're sort of gaining influence with the different characters in the story that change up the narrative in some way. Anyway, I saw a lot in this little just one scenario demo. I didn't have a chance to sit through the sort of after scenario narrative stuff, so I only saw little glimpses of it because I did have to take off, but wow, I'm excited about this one. My name is absolutely on the list to preview this one. I cannot wait to see more, and I cannot wait to show more off on this channel. So that was day 1. Now going to day 2, I'm headed back into PAX Unplugged. First thing first, early in the morning with my 5-year-old son and 9-year-old nephew, looking to play a bunch of kid games. First stop was Mindware. Why? Because Mindware is a game that is, a publisher that just recently released a new kids legacy game called Ziggurat from Matt Leacock, sort of king of legacy games. If you don't already know, Matt Leacock had a kids game a while back called Naked Mole Rats in Space. I don't know anything about it, I've never played it, but this is apparently sort of a legacy version of that called Ziggurat, where you're taking on this sort of narrative campaign, legacy campaign. You all take on a character, an avatar, and at least in the first demo, we played through the first chapter with the team at the booth, And you each had a character, and the job was to get all of your characters to the top of this giant ziggurat, basically a step-by-step pyramid. And the way you're doing it is through these cards that have two things on them. But before I can explain the cards, the whole system is kind of like chutes and ladders. If you land at a certain spot that's at the bottom of the ladder, you'll climb to the next level on this platform or the ziggurat. And if you land at the top of one of the sort of chutes or the slides, you slide down one level. But also on each level, there are a variety of different flame enemies of 3 or 4 different colors. 4, I think blue, yellow, red, pink, and green or so. And they're on the board, and if you ever touch one of them, you die, and the game ends. There are also holes scattered around in the floor on each of these levels, and if you ever fall into one of those holes, again, you die. And on your turn, you've got a card that has a top and a bottom action, and the top action is going to move your character or another player's character or multiple people's characters, and the bottom is going to move a specific color of flame on the board. So you're basically using these movement cards to move the different characters around and move the flames around, hoping to avoid the flames while you're slowly climbing this ziggurat. But also, if you can move a flame into a hole, then the flame falls into the hole and goes away. They do respawn later based on some of the cards that instead of moving flames, actually add new flames to it. But it's basically you're avoiding these flames as you do this movement puzzle of card-based movement as you spiral up this giant structure. And that's the first chapter, but I don't want to spoil anything beyond that. I haven't had a chance to play anything. I have a review copy on its way to me, but I know that it's a legacy game. Things are going to change. Rules are going to change. There will be stickers placed on. I'm sure the characters are going to gain abilities based on the physicality of the pieces or the components that I saw and the player cards that had all kinds of lines that were blank. Very excited to see what happens here because the narrative, the story is interesting. The core mechanism of moving around while avoiding things was not mind-blowing, but it was very fun. And actually, I think both my son and my nephew would call this their game of the con. So they had a blast playing this. But also, while we were at the Mindware booth, we saw another game called Tightrope. That's this fun sort of party dexterity game that I'd never heard of, but we both, well, all 3 of us decided, hey, we got to stop and try this out. And this is actually the first game. We played this before Ziggurat, but Tightrope is a really cool dexterity game where first everybody at the table starts by placing all of these vertical sticks out on a board, the slotted board, they slot into them. And then you take these sort of rubber bands, but made out of more like that hair tie material, and stretch them out over sticks. And they have to go around at least 2 or 3 sticks. I can't remember. There's rules about how many sticks they can go, but basically you're stretching them out. So you're making loops like this across the board of different thicknesses and lengths, and they're all sort of crossing over each other, making a network of sort of holes that are crisscrossed ropes across the play area. And then you've got a big bucket of marbles. Everybody's got one large one and then a bunch of small ones. And basically the goal of the core game is that whoever places all their marbles on the strings first and they stay out there wins. But the way that it works is on your turn, you're going to place one marble out on the ropes. And if it stays there, great. Anything that falls off on your turn will roll to the sides. You take it and you put them back into your bowl, including anybody else's marbles that fall off when you place something on there. And you're just going to go around the table placing out marbles until somebody's placed everything out. But the cool thing is, as you're placing them into these holes, the marbles themselves start making the holes as the marbles are sort of surrounding areas. And you can stack marbles on top of marbles and sort of make these pyramids of marbles in areas where they're sort of sitting well. So it's this really cool sort of push your luck dexterity game of can I make a marble stay in this place if I put the marble there? And according to the guy we were playing with who works for Mindware, there's apparently other sort of variants of the rules where maybe you have to place your large marble last, or different kinds of placement rules that add difficulty or add challenge or add different kinds of goals to the game. Anyway, not a game for my channel because it's very much not solo, but a really, really fun, simple, light, but challenging party-style dexterity game that we had a blast playing. After that, we headed over to Wise Wizard, which is also Wacky Wizard for the sort of more kids, family-style games. We played 2 games there. The first one was Star Realms Junior. I don't think it's called Star Realms Academy, I think is the name of the game. It's basically the kids' version of Star Realms. It's Star Realms with some stuff removed from it. If you don't know Star Realms is a fairly simple deck building game, a la something like Dominion, except that it's a battle game. It's a head-to-head. You're fighting off against each other, collecting ships that do attack, collecting cards that protect you or heal you, and you're basically trying to build a deck that does damage to your opponent while protecting yourself. But the unique twist is that, or unique at the time, a little bit less so now, but still cool twist is that there are different sort of suits or colors of cards, and if you play a card that is of a color of another card that you've already played, then you get a sort of secondary bonus action on that card when it's played because you're sort of chaining more and more cards of that same color. So it sort of rewards you for building a deck that is sort of 1 or 2 colors rather than 3 or 4 colors because you get more bonuses out of it, and it is just a head-to-head deck builder kind of game. Nothing mind-blowing, but it was cool to see it stripped down enough that somebody like my nephew could get into it. Even my 5-year-old, with a little help from me, was getting into it. So it may be a great way to sort of start kids off with a new deck builder or their very first deck builder kind of game experience. The other thing we looked at while we were there is Robot Quest Arena, which is sort of a slightly more complicated game that's not really for little kids. My 9-year-old probably could have handled most of it. My 5-year-old was loving it though, because you got these big chunky plastic robots that you're moving around an arena fighting each other with. He really sort of glommed on to this idea of deck building, because that's also a deck builder, but with an arena combat movement sort of puzzle where you're fighting things off, getting weapons, adding them to your deck, using those weapons to fight your opponents. There's quite a bit more to the game than we were shown, because from what I understand, each of the robots has their own ability, and they also have the ability to sort of push other robots around the arena, which we didn't really do any of, because I think they were trying to tone it down, because we were also playing against another young child in that game. So we sort of got the stripped down rules, but with those stripped down rules, it was pretty approachable for a child. The big, chunky, colorful robots were really cool, and who doesn't love a robot battle? That is one that I definitely would try out more. I'm not a huge fan of Star Realms or Star Realms Academy, but Robot Quest Arena looks like a really fun deck-building, driven arena combat game, and I would definitely love to play that more. Again, no solo on that one, but it was a whole lot of fun. The next game I really wanted to show off to both of them, and wanted to try myself, is Flat Out Games and AEG are working on, it's coming out next spring, a kid's version of Cascadia called Cascadia Junior. But on our way there, we passed by the Heidelberg booth, who was showing off a game called Fish and Cats, which there's not a whole lot going on, but the kids really enjoyed it. It's a sort of set collection card drafting game, except you're not just drafting cards. Everybody gets a cat paw that they slide onto their finger. And there's an available sort of array of cards on the table that you're drafting from. And instead of just taking the card that you want, everybody at the same time takes their cat paw, and you sort of count down and everybody puts their finger on one of the cards. And if you're the only person with your finger on the card, you get to take that card. And if more than one person touch a card, then that card basically just gets discarded. And you're drafting cards in this way, trying to make sort of sets of cards and scoring points based on sets of different kinds of fish and the different sort of variable scoring thresholds of each of those kinds of fish. It's a very lightweight drafting game, but these cool cat paw finger gloves were really fun. And this idea of sort of real-time drafting where everybody's sort of choosing a card and you're punished if you choose the same card was a very interesting twist on drafting that I hadn't seen. So for a family or a kid, it could be a very fun little light drafting game. So then we did make it to AEG/Flat Out, and we got to see Cascadia Junior. Now, they were running full demos of this, so we did play a full game. Myself, my son, and no. I played with my son, and I say I played with my son, but he ended up playing the game all by himself against his 9-year-old cousin. If you don't know Cascadia already, Cascadia is a game, the core game, the original game, where you've sort of got a drafting pool of landscape tiles, of different kinds of landscapes, and each landscape tile is associated with an animal token. And the landscape tiles themselves have some kind of animal printed on them. And when you're drafting, you draft the tile and the token that are connected together, placing the tile out on your landscape, and then placing the animal token on any landscape in your area that has that token sort of printed on it and doesn't have anything placed there yet. And you're trying to build out big regions of each type of landscape But then each of the animals in the original game have some unique scoring goal, like having two bears next to each other with no other bears near them, or having salmon that spawn out in a straight sort of run across your play area, and so on. So this is the kids' version of that. And in this game, you're only drafting tiles, no animals, but each of the tiles is actually a double tile in this game. And there are sort of different levels of difficulty that we can play. We played in sort of the second difficulty level, and that is you're scoring based on animals and landscape adjacency. So you're going to take one of those two-piece tiles, kind of like a hexagonal domino, and you're going to slot it into your map. And anytime you have three, I believe it was 3 animals of the same type in a row, you place tokens, sorry, in a row means connected together in any sort of shape. You take 3 tokens of the animals, covering up those animals to know that they've already been triggered, and then you get a sort of animal chip matching that animal. And that goes onto your player board. And you keep doing that, and you keep doing that until you've played through all the tiles. Then at the end of the game, if you have a grouping of a specific landscape that's at least 3 tiles big, you're going to get 1 sort of token of that landscape type. Or if it's at least 6 spaces big, you'll get 2 tokens of that landscape type. And you can have multiple areas of the same landscape that you're getting tokens for. And then on the back of each of these tokens, there are some pine cones, maybe 1 or 2. I don't know if there are any 3s, but maybe. So you flip over all the tokens that you've got at the end of the game, you count up all the pine cones, and whoever has the most pine cones is the winner. There's apparently also 1 more level up where the animals have specific patterns, I think, that you have to match that gets you closer to the scoring goals of the original Cascadia. But let me say this, both my son and my nephew said, I want this game, I want this game, I want this game as soon as we were done. They've both been promised that next year for their birthday, because they have spring-summer birthdays, that they'll probably be getting a copy of this game. I love the original Cascadia, and the fact that kids can sort of have that same kind of fulfilling experience with Cascadia Junior was very, very cool for me to see, and I'm very excited for this to be released so more kids can get a chance to try this out, because it was a really, really cool sort of distillation of what makes Cascadia Cascadia that still works enough that a kid can enjoy the game. Then finally on our way out, down the hallway, leaving PAX Unplugged, we stopped in at CGE. CGE has its own sort of giant demo room, and I wanted to stop in there and see because I had heard from Mike at One Stop Co-op Shop. He was there with his son for a lot of the convention as well, and they had gotten a chance to play Little Alchemists. Now, Little Alchemists is again another My Little or Junior or Kids version of another big chunky, this one huge chunky Euro worker placement, logic deduction kind of game called Alchemists, which you're sort of mixing ingredients to figure out what they make and using that to solve puzzles and sort of sell contracts or fulfill contracts to make money. Anyway, I don't really know. I had it and I never actually got a chance to play it before I got rid of it many, 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 many years ago. But anyway, flash forward to now and there's Little Alchemist, which is a kid's version of this game. And it is a multi-tier game, so as you play through, you unlock more and more sort of rules, complexity, so younger kids can start playing it, and as they get older, there's more and more complexity that gets added to it. We only played the first super simple chapter because, again, my son was 5. We were playing a little girl that was 6, I think, and my nephew is 9, so we didn't get to try any of the higher level stuff. But the way that the core game, the main game is, you use a cell phone app, and you've got a sort of shield, and behind your shield you've got some different ingredients. And on your turn, you're going to take 2 of your tiles of 2 different kinds of ingredients, slot them into your player shield, and then scan them with the cell phone app. And it's going to show you that if you mix that with that, it makes a specific kind of potion. And I believe there were 3 different kinds of potions in the main game. And so you're trying to, you've got this little pyramid on your board with holes in it that sort of line up to all of the ingredients. So this ingredient has this row and this ingredient has this row. So at the intersection where they meet, you put a potion token that matches what you've just discovered. Because the point is, every round of the game, there's a different customer that's looking for a specific kind of potion. And if you can give them that potion, you get points. And that's all there is in the original, in the base game of this. So there's basically 3 rounds, and each round is triggered when all of the tiles are gone. Because every time you make a potion, you discard those 2 tiles and take 2 new tiles. There are a couple of other ways to get additional tiles or get some extra stuff while you're playing, but basically that's it. You put 2 things in, you mix it to see what you get, and if it matches the thing that's being sold that round, you sell it. But you can only ever sell once per round. So this core sort of chapter 1 is super simple because all you can do is sell 1 potion 3 times. So the max you can score is those 3 potions that you're selling. Later on, I think in higher levels, they give you other abilities to sell things or make money or make points based on information that you've learned in other different ways. But again, I didn't get a chance to try that out. But the fact that something like this big, heavy Euro game, Alchemists, could be enjoyed by my 5-year-old to a level that like, ooh, I wonder what happens if I mix this and this, and oh, I got the right potion. And just seeing his brain work and just teaching him this idea of logical, this plus this makes this, now I need a token to mark that because I know this information, and watching him being able to understand how this column and this column meet here means I put the token at that location. He had a blast with it, even though that first level really wasn't that much going on. So to see him connect with the game as much as he did, and to know that there's more complexity that can sort of slowly be introduced into the game as he's ready to it, this is one that I will absolutely be tracking down and checking out more of in the future, because I think this is one that grows with kids, starts off young, 5 maybe a little too young, but it worked well for him in chapter 1. But starts off young and then grows with the child getting more complex and complex. I think it's really cool. I know Mike at the One Stop Co-op Shop said he's playing it a ton with his son, who I believe was 11 years old, getting into more of the sort of advanced stuff into the game. I had a blast. It was a great end to our trip at PAX. This year at PAX was really, really great. I had a whole lot of fun, a whole lot less stress this time than I did. I can't believe we played 7 games with my kids this time. They had a blast. My son's all ready to go back again. I'm a little bit sad because next year it looks like they're moving it to the weekend before Thanksgiving, which tends to be my parents' weekend at school, so I don't know that I can make it next year. But in any case, I look forward to my next adventure at PAX or at any other gaming convention that I and my son can get to. I am very, very, very excited to try a lot of these games that I've talked about here. I hope that this was more helpful than just long-winded me talking to the air, but I did discover a lot here. I'm glad that I was able to share them with you. I look forward to sharing more details about many of these games with you in the future. Thanks for watching. I do ask if you did enjoy this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon below, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks.